Hello, my name is Abby Bormann. Thank you for joining me for my presentation titled Classical Music, Performance, and Astronomy, A Few Sweet Ideas. A little bit about myself. I am a chemistry major and a mathematics minor at Minnesota State University Moorhead. I've been working with Dr. Sarah Schultz at the MSU Planetarium for about 3 years. I've served as an apprentice, a presenter, a show developer, and an observing session assistant. I've also been playing violin for about 12 years as a hobby. My interest in astronomy and longtime love of music are what led me to create planetarium shows that combine these two subjects. The very first show that I wrote and presented was centered around Gustav Holst's The Planets. This 50-minute planetarium show takes the audience on a tour of the solar system through the lens of Holst's music. When we arrive at each planet, I'll talk about the mythology of that planet's namesake. This is because Holst was inspired by the astrological character of the planets, not anything about the science. I'll also talk about the musicality of Holst's work. I'll highlight a specific theme or phrase on my own violin and then invite the audience to listen for that in a recording of the music. Then we can use what we've learned about the mythology and musicality for each planet and connect that to the actual physical features of the planet itself. You may remember me talking a little bit about this show at LIPS in 2019, which is pictured on the left. The structure of the show is best illustrated through example. So Holst begins his work with an exciting opening number, Mars, the Bringer of War, which gives a very good depiction of war. He uses aggressive repeated rhythms and proud wailing brass to represent the proud and angry astrological character of Mars, which fits pretty well with our mythological idea of the Roman god of war. For some historical context, The Planets was composed in the August of 1914, just prior to the outbreak of World War I. So Holst paints a picture of soldiers marching forward into battle, which is represented by the repeated, relentless rhythms in the strings, which are called an ostinato pattern, shown in the sheet music on this slide. We can connect the aggressive nature of the music to the aggressive-looking color of Mars. We know that Mars looks red because of iron in the Martian soil that oxidizes or rusts, causing this blood red coloring that is fit for an ironclad war god marching into battle. Normally, this show would be a one-woman show where I perform the music and do the presenting. Fortunately, in the September of 2019, we had the opportunity to collaborate with our local symphony orchestra as they performed The Planets in its entirety. So you can listen and watch this clip here of a dress rehearsal where they perform Mars. You may have noticed the projection in the background, which is a live performance by our director, Dr. Sarah Schultz, using our UniView software. She came up with choreography to go along with the music live as it was performed, and the experience was truly out of this world. For my next show, I chose to do something more suited to a soloist, not a huge ensemble like The Planets would require. I also focused instead on constellations rather than on the solar system. I wrote a 50-minute planetarium show centered around Antonio Vivaldi's famous violin concertos, The Four Seasons. The four seasons were composed as what was called program music, which is intended to represent specific moods, themes, or landscapes. Vivaldi was purportedly inspired by the paintings of Italian painter Marco Ricci, which are shown at the top of this slide. So I combined these visuals with the music, and then also Vivaldi had written some sonnets to accompany his music. These sonnets had some references to mythology in some cases, so I was able to combine the myths of our seasonal constellations with the music and the visual art and poetry that was all involved in Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Here's an example. We have the first violin concerto, Spring. The second movement is the slow movement, or Largo, which the poem describes a goatherd sleeping in a meadow. We can hear this serene quality represented in the music. Then I was able to find a work of art, not by Marco Ricci, but by one of his contemporaries, that depicts a goatherd in a field with his goats. And of course, if you know your seasonal constellations, you know in the spring sky you can see Boötes, the herdsman, which is quite appropriate. This is one of the more straightforward connections that I make in this show. Some of the connections get to be a little bit far-fetched. The most recent show that I've been working on is intended for a younger audience that is based on Camille Saint-Saens' Carnival of the Animals. It's a more playful exploration of animal-themed constellations along with the music of Saint-Saens. It's supposed to be accompanied by a small ensemble of string musicians and a keyboard, which is about as much as we can fit in our smaller dome. Of course, COVID had other ideas, so this show has yet to be presented. The constellations and music are also accompanied by whimsical poetry adapted from Ogden Nash verses. The actual Ogden Nash poems are a bit esoteric at times, so we're working on adapting them so that they're a little bit more appropriate for a younger audience. So for the example, we have the first movement, the Royal March of the Lion. And for this presentation, we wanted to use one of our university's former professors, Dr. Konrad Chinsky, as our narrator. He had a bit of a side gig with the Maestro Classic CD series, in which he was the narrator. So listen to him narrate the poem by Ogden Nash, and then also listen to a recording of the Royal March of the Lion. And I want you to listen to the music and listen for the roar of the lion represented by the pianos in the end of the clip.
The lion is the king of beasts and husband of the lioness. Gazelles and things on which he feasts address him as Your Highness. There are those who admire that roar of his in the African jungles and velds, but I think wherever the lion is, I'd rather be somewhere else.
Did you hear the roar? If this were a live planetarium show with a bunch of little kids, I would invite you to share your best lion's roar.
The lion.
Thank you for joining me for this presentation highlighting our astronomical, mythological, and zoological music-based work at the MSUM Planetarium. If you have any questions or want more information, you can contact myself or the Planetarium Director, Dr. Sarah Schultz, at the following emails. Thank you again for watching.